Even if they couldn't match the Empire's knights, the soldiers guarding the castle were fairly skilled. Climb was a few notches above them, and that was another reason the nobles resented him. He was stronger than the soldiers they backed. It was possible to find a sponsoring noble who didn't belong to a faction. But in the current power struggle between the king's faction and the nobles, there was only one noble skilled enough to strategically flit back and forth like a bat between them. Among the soldiers, only one hadn't joined either faction besides those endorsed by that exceptional noble. That was Climb. Climb's position was difficult. Normally, someone of Climb's background wouldn't be able to serve as Renner's personal attendant. Protecting a member of the royal family was usually reserved for nobles. But there was the exception of Gazov Stronov, the strongest soldier in the kingdom, and his elite men. That, and more importantly, few people could openly oppose Princess Renner if she strongly desired something. Perhaps a relative could speak frankly with her, but if the king approved, no one could dissent. Climb had a private room because of this difficult position. If he were an ordinary soldier, he would have shared a big common room instead. Renner's authoritative pronouncement was one reason he had his own room. The other reason was to isolate him. They didn't know where to place him because he didn't belong to a faction. He was a problem. Considering Climb's own circumstances and his position, he would naturally belong to the king's faction. But the king's faction was mainly comprised of nobles who swore loyalty to the king. Climb was a nobody whose existence the nobles would undoubtedly frown upon, so the group wouldn't know how to treat him if they took him in, and he would naturally cooperate with them if they left him alone. Whereas for the nobles, winning Climb over would be a great prize, but also dangerous. Still, each faction contained countless nobles. Their thoughts and opinions weren't monolithic. In the end, a faction was no more than a gathering of similarly minded people who desired the advantage of banding together. So of course, some in the king's faction detested Climb, the beautiful golden princess's closest aide despite his uncertain peasant background, and some in the opposing nobles' faction wanted to befriend him. In any case, no one thus far had been so imprudent as to cause schisms in their faction over one guy. The result was that, although everyone wanted to avoid him going to the other side, they didn't want to go so far as to have him on theirs. That's why no one talked to him, why he dined alone. He ate his meal without chatting with anyone and looked to neither side. He finished his breakfast in less than 10 minutes. Okay, guess I should get going. Satisfied, he talked to himself under his breath, a growing habit from being alone so much as he stood up. A soldier who happened to be passing by bumped into him. The man's elbow jabbed a spot he'd hurt training with Gazov that morning, and although his face remained expressionless, he stopped short from the pain. The soldier who bumped into him kept walking without saying a thing. Naturally, none of the surrounding soldiers spoke up, either. Some of those who had witnessed what happened furrowed their brows a tiny bit. Still, no one moved to say something. Climb exhaled slowly and walked off with his empty dishes. This degree of harassment was all too common. He was just glad it hadn't happened when there was hot stew in his bowl. Someone would stick a leg out and trip him. Someone would bump into him, pretending it was an accident. These things happened all the time. Still, what about it? Climb walked on, unconcerned. They couldn't do anything more than that, either, especially in a place like the mess hall, where there were so many people watching. Climb kept his chest out. He kept his eyes facing forward and his head high. If he did anything shameful, it would cause trouble for his master, Renner. The reputation of the woman he devoted his whole self to was on the line. Chapter 2, The Blue Roses, 13 Late Fire Moon, September 8, 2 a.m., perfectly outfitted in his white full-plate armor with his sword strapped to his hip, Climb stepped into Valencia Palace. The palace was made up of 3 main structures. He entered the largest one, where the royal family resided. Unlike the mess hall he had just left, the palace was designed to allow in so much light that the interior brightly shone. He walked down a long corridor so clean it seemed unlikely one would find even a speck of dust, let alone garbage. His gear made hardly a sound. It had been forged from a mix of mithril and orichalcum, and it was enchanted. Along the broad and spotless hallway stood the elite soldiers who guarded the palace. They were clad in full armor and stood rigidly the kingdom's knights. In the Empire, A knight was an ordinary person transformed into a professional soldier. But in the kingdom, the word referred to those who had life peerage. Third or fourth sons of nobles, men who wouldn't inherit their houses, often aimed to join the knighthood. That said, the royal household paid consummate wages, so only those skilled enough were chosen. Not even a noble could get by on connections alone. Perhaps the most straightforward way to describe the kingdom's knights was as the king's bodyguards. Incidentally, Gazef's title of warrior captain was something the king fabricated because many objected to knighting a commoner. Correspondingly, the elite soldiers he hand-selected to serve under him became known as the Royal Select. Clym bobbed his head toward the knights. They at least usually returned his greetings. Some did so unwillingly, but others actually meant it. These men were nobles, and they were loyal to the king. They also had the hearts of warriors. Naturally, they had plenty of respect for an outstanding soldier who would never lapse in his devotion to the king. At the same time, there were others Clym passed in the corridors who directed outright hostility at him. The maids. Most made unpleasant expressions whenever they saw him. Unlike the average servant, most maids who worked in the palace were the daughters of noble households, hoping to raise their prestige through service. In a way, these maids were higher in status than Clym. Quite a few were from elite noble families, particularly the maids who closely attended the royal family. Their discontent at having to pay obeisance to a lowborn man was clear in their angry faces. True, Clym's social standing was lower than theirs, so they probably wanted to express their displeasure when Renna wasn't around. Clym understood that, and he didn't protest, but those feelings made for a blank expression. The maids mistook this to mean he was ignoring them. This further increased their dislike for him. It resulted in a vicious cycle. Clym was completely oblivious to it all. In fact, if he were better able to realize these sorts of things, he would have been better at handling all sorts of situations. The young soldier was a bit dense. Walking through the palace like this did place a little mental strain on him. Naturally, there were other members of the royal family around besides Renna and Ramposa III. Seeing one draw near, Clym shifted to the side of the hallway. He stood at attention and raised a hand to his chest in a salute. There were two people. The one bringing up the rear was tall and lean with blonde hair slicked back. His name was Marquis Revan, one of the 6 great nobles. The problem was the plump man walking in front of him. His name was Zanak Vol Onegana Ryle Vaself. He was second in line for the throne, the younger of the 2 princes. His feet stopped, and his flabby face twisted into a sarcastic grin. "Oh, if it isn't Clym, are you going to check on the monster?" There was only one person Prince Zanak called a monster. Though Clym knew it was disrespectful to speak out, he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. "Your Highness, with all due respect, Princess Renna is in no way a monster. She is kind-hearted and beautiful. One could say the princess is the kingdom's treasure. If a woman who proposed policies like eliminating slavery to help the populace wasn't a treasure, then who was? Due to the nobles' interference, not many of her plans had seen the light of day, but Clym was certain. He knew how much Renna thought about the people. Zanak, who did little, had no right to utter even a single word about the kind-hearted woman who shed tears before Clym every time her proposals were mocked and rejected. He was taken by the urge to shout the prince down, to pummel the rotund man with his fists. Zanak's words were not something a person should say about their blood relatives, even if they were half-siblings. But it would be unforgivable for Clym to reveal his inner rage. Renna had warned him, "My brother is trying to provoke you into saying something defamatory. He wants an excuse to separate you from me. Clym, don't ever show him any weakness." Clym remembered the day he had sworn to her sorrowful face, to his master Denid, by her own family, that he would never betray her. "I wasn't calling Renna a monster. You must just think she is, in your heart." "That is what I would say, but I won't spout anything as clickety as that. But a treasure, huh? Do you think she actually expects her proposals to pass? I feel she brings them up knowing all the while that they are futile. That can be true. Impossible. This is just the envy of a man who can only make groundless accusations. I do not believe that to be the case." "Heh heh 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 heh. So you really can see that she is a monster, huh? Got any eyes in your head? Or is she just that clever? It wouldn't hurt to doubt her a little bit, right? Doubt her, Princess Rena is the kingdom's treasure. My conviction on that point will never waver. Everything she does is right. Climb could declare that because he watched her closer than anyone. I see. How amusing. Then will you tell the monster something for me? Our elder brother thinks she is a tool in his schemes. But if she cooperates with me, I can revoke her succession rights and set her up with a domain on the frontier. Climb was assailed by an unpleasant feeling. You jest. I can believe you would speak of such a thing here. I'll pretend I didn't hear it. Heh. That is too bad. Shall we then, Marquis Revan? The man who had been silently observing the two bowed his head slightly. Climb wasn't sure about where the nobleman stood. Marquis Revan always seemed to keep his distance, but when under his gaze, Climb got a different feeling from him than the other nobles. Rena had never told Climb how to behave around him. Oh, the Marquis agrees that she is ghastly. No, it would be better to say that we've formed an alliance, because our opinions align on that matter. Prince, let me tell him, Marquis Revan. So Climb, if I thought you were too far gone, I wouldn't say this, but I have to warn you, since you might be getting duped by that beast. She is a monster. I beg your pardon, but allow me to inquire. What is it that makes you think Princess Rena is a monster? Is there anyone who thinks more of the people, of the country than her? It is because almost everything she attempts ultimately ends in failure. Too many of her plans go nowhere. At first I thought she was just bad at laying the groundwork, but then I spoke to Marquis Revan one day. Suddenly it dawned on me, what if it is all according to plan? When thinking about it that way, everything started to make sense. If that is true, then a woman who doesn't have much contact with the nobles, and who is mostly shut up in the palace, is still somehow manipulating them all. If that is not a monster, then what is? It is just a misunderstanding. Princess Rena isn't that kind of person, Climb declared. Those tears couldn't be fake. Princess Rena was compassionate and kind-hearted. Climb, whom she plucked off the streets, knew that better than anyone. But his words didn't reach the prince. Zanak flashed a wry smile and walked away with Marquis Revan following behind. In the now empty hallway, Climb whispered, Princess Rena is the kindest person in the whole kingdom. I may be a nobody, but I guarantee it. He paused. He continued his monologue in his head. If Princess Rena ruled the kingdom, it would be a wonderful country that always considered its people. Of course, considering the succession, it was an impossible wish. Still, Climb couldn't abandon the thought. Late fire moon, September 8, 11 a.m. Eventually, Climb arrived at the room in the palace he visited most often. He scanned the area a couple of times before turning the knob. Not knocking flew in the face of common sense, but that was the princess's wish. She wouldn't allow him to knock, no matter how much he protested. So Climb gave in. He would be in too much of a spot if the princess started crying. He did manage to get her to allow for special circumstances. For example, certainly when the king was watching, he couldn't enter without knocking. It was true, though, that pushing the door open without knocking caused him a lot of anxiety. It was no wonder he got stressed when he thought, this is not okay. He was about to push it wide open when he heard a heated exchange through the crack, so he stopped his hand. There were two voices. Both women's. Climb was still outside, but the owner of one of the voices didn't notice him because she was absorbed in the conversation. He didn't want to ruin the moment, so he stood immobile and listened to the voices inside. He did feel guilty for eavesdropping, but he would have felt worse if he disrupted such a passionate discussion. What I am telling you, people generally focus on the immediate benefits that are right in front of them. I know your plan is to rotate different crops, and I don't really think that will make them grow better, but when would we see a result? By my rough calculations, it would take about 6 years. So during those 6 years, what are the estimated financial losses due to changing crops? It depends on the crop, but if we say a usual yield is 1, then it will be 0.8. So a 0.2 loss. But after 6 years, we should end up with a steady gain of 0.3. And if we can get the livestock grazing in a cultivated pasture, that should increase even further. If they were only hearing that last bit, anyone would go for it. But will they accept a 0.2 loss for 6 years? I wonder, what if the government lent them 0.2 with no collateral and no interest? They would only ask them to pay it back once they could. I don't think there would be a problem. And if the yield doesn't go up, then they won't have to pay it back or something like that. If the yield does go up, they'd be able to pay it off in 4 years. Seems like a hard sell. Why, I've been telling you, people focus on the immediate benefits they can see. Most people want stability. Even hearing they have 1.3 times more in 6 years, it is only natural to hesitate. I don't really get it. The test fields are doing fine. The tests might be going well, but that doesn't make the results absolute. That is true. The results aren't certain because the test can account for every possible scenario. Considering variations in soil quality and climate, we have to do a pretty large-scale test, so it is not very persuasive. I don't know if that 0.3 increase is the minimum or the average, but it won't be very convincing in the face of all those qualifiers. You have to be able to promise long-term benefits after promising immediate benefits. So if we offered them the 0.2 without asking them to pay it back, that will make the opposing nobles happy, since the king will lose some of his power. But if after 6 years we can really get that boost in agriculture, the kingdom's power should increase. That means the nobles against us would get stronger too, and the king's power would lessen. The nobles supporting him will never allow that. In that case, we could appeal to the merchants. You mean the wealthy ones? They have their own considerations. If they cooperate too much with the king's faction, they could potentially lose business with the other faction. This is hard, Lachius. Your plans fall through all the time because you are no good at laying the groundwork and making the necessary preparations. I mean, I understand that it is harder because there are two large opposing factions. How about implementing your plan only on lands directly within the king's domain? My brothers would never let me. Those honorable men who left all the wisdom inside your mother for you. Well, it is not as though we share a mom. Then it is from the king. Really, it is so sad if the royal family can't even agree. The room quieted down. Clym realized there was a lull in the conversation. Oh, you can come in anytime. It is okay, right, Renna? Clym's heart nearly leaped out of his chest. He was shocked she had noticed him, but it also made sense. He slowly opened the door. Excuse me. The familiar decor appeared before his eyes. This room was luxurious without being gaudy. A table near the window held 2 blonde-haired ladies. Both were beautiful, and their pretty dresses suited them. One was obviously Renna. It was her room. Across from her sat another woman. Both her green eyes and pink lips had a healthy glow. She wasn't as beautiful as Renna, but she overflowed with a different sort of charm. If Renna had the glitter of a jewel, then this woman was filled with the spark of life. Her name was Lachius Alvine Dale Aindra. One would never guess from the pale pink dress she wore at the moment, but she led one of the kingdom's only 2 adamantite rank adventurer teams. She was also Renna's best friend. Her overwhelming natural ability must have been what allowed her to perform so many feats and achieve adamantite rank at the young age of 19. Sometimes deep inside, Clym felt jealous despite himself. Good morning, Princess Renna, Lady Aindra. Morning, Clym, good morning. Having greeted them properly, Clym moved to stand in his usual spot behind and to the right of the princess. She stopped him. Clym, not there, over here. She was gesturing to the chair on her right. Clym was confused. There were 5 chairs around the circular table. That was the usual number. But there were 3 cups of tea, one in front of Renna, one in front of Lachius, and one at the place next to Lachius, not where Renna was indicating he should sit. He scanned the room, but didn't he see a third person? Feeling strange, Clym gazed at the chair. His master was asking him to commit the disrespectful act of sharing a table with royalty despite being a commoner. She had ordered him to come in without knocking as a favor for her and more. Most of his master's orders weighed heavily on him, but Clym looked to the other woman for a lifeline. His plea to be spared from sitting with them met a simple rejection. I am fine with it, but Lady Aindra, I told you before, you can call me Lachius. Then to Renna she said, Clym is special. Grah, at Lachius' syrupy tone, as if the sentence was punctuated by affection, Renna forcibly smiled, voicing her displeasure. It was possible to call upturned lips with completely serious eyes a smile. Lady Aindra, no more jokes, please. Okay, Mr. Straight-Laced. Maybe you should learn a thing or two from me about how to relax. You were joking. Renna asked in surprise. Lachius froze in response, as if on purpose, then let out an exaggerated sigh. Of course. Well, Clym is definitely special, but it is because he is yours. Climb awkwardly averted his gaze from Renna as she blushed and held her face in her hands when his eyes suddenly popped open. Melted into the shadow remaining in the corner of the room was someone sitting against the wall, holding their knees. A woman wearing all black, form-fitting clothing. She didn't match the atmosphere of the room at all. What the? Taken by surprise, Climb reached for the sword at his hip, lowering his center of gravity, and moved to protect Renna. Lachius sighed.